I've told you once, I'll tell you again. You need to be following Ross Dellinger over at yahoosports.com. He does not work for the same company I do. They don't pay me anything to promote him. I'm just telling you, I believe in promoting good work when it's happening out there. Ross is doing, I think, as good a job on following the stories in college football. Not just the breaking news, coach transactions and stuff, but the stories that matter. He's doing as good a job as anyone right now. So he had, over on yahoosports.com today, a paper popper of a story that did not get the traction I thought it should have gotten. I'm leading our show tonight with it. That's how big a deal I think it is. So what do you want? Let me ask you a question. Everybody needs to be honest with themselves. I'm going to tell you what I want. I want to know, when you read a headline about conference realignment here, and you read a headline about transfer portal there, NIL, the House settlement, all this legal stuff, when you read those stories and you see and hear those stories, you got to filter it through the mechanism of what you want. Because really, if I'm an NIL agent, if I'm a third party out there that is enriching myself off of this current format, I love the current format. I love the insanity of it all. There's no incentive, in my mind, for there to ever be order and there to ever be rules that are enforced. However, most of us are not third parties. Most of us are not NIL agents. Most of us are just fans of the sport, right? That's what I am. So I look at it and I'll tell you what I want. What I want is for college football to thrive. I will not be bashful about admitting that anymore. I want college football to thrive. I want it to thrive even if it means coming at the expense of an individual player making a little bit less money. I want it to thrive even if it means coming at the expense of some street agents who are tossed aside. I want what's best for college football. Not because I don't care about anything else. I don't care about anything above college football in this whole grand scheme of things. So I'm telling you up front, that's where I'm coming from. So with that in mind, now you need to read what Dellinger put out today. This is a ground shaker. This is a really big tremor in the college football world. So what he's talking about in this piece is a total reworking of how rules happen in college football. And here's the most important part, kids, because a rule's not worth anything without enforcement. How would they be enforced? So here's what you need to know. Right now, the House settlement, which you've probably heard about for a while. Is that the Georgia Dome, Colin? Oh, I hope for once you weren't listening on podcast. We just had a picture of the late Georgia Dome. It's no longer with us. RIP Georgia Dome. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, so the House settlement. I apologize. So the House settlement is very boring, and it takes 5 hours to read through it all, but here's the crux of it. It's up for final approval on April 7th, and it's basically a long-sought settlement between players that used to not be paid for playing college football, and they're looking at players being paid now, and they're saying, wait a second, retroactively, can't we sue the NCAA because you didn't let us make money back in 2009? And someone said, yeah, you sure can. And the NCAA did too. That's why they said, all right, class action lawsuit, let's head towards a settlement. But with that settlement, we want conditions. And we want enforceable rules, and we want an environment from here moving forward. If we pay out this huge settlement, we want an environment where we can make rules and enforce them moving forward. Now, as you would imagine, a lot of legal types out there have a problem with that because legal types make money off of there being a litigious nature to everything. I am out for the best interest of college football, so I don't care what the legal types want. I told you up front, I'll tell you again, I want the sport to thrive. So, here's what's happening April 7th. There is a cautious optimism within the world of college football administrators, some names you'd know, most of them you don't, that thing will, for lack of a better term, be ratified, but it'll be agreed upon. It'll be approved. If it is approved, then it kind of is the dawning of a new era in college athletics. Now, this is where you really need to read Ross's report today. Not to be confused with the Ross Report, which Jim Ross used to put out, I think, in WWF, the magazine. It was appointment reading for me. This has nothing to do with pro wrestling. So here's the hope. This is where it really gets interesting. This is the non-boring part. So if you're looking around college football right now and you're saying, Dude, I don't even pay attention to recruiting anymore because all the players move around. Commitment means nothing. The transfer portal's a joke every year. Dude, NILs just pay for play. If you found yourself saying anything like that, let me blow the whistle, because this is where you need to come back to the table and you need to pay attention. So here's the hope. The hope is if that settlement gets approved, then meetings last week and this week have been happening in Washington, D.C., according to Ross Dellinger's report, in anticipation of that being approved. And if it's approved, they're ready to create a new investigative and enforcement arm. And notice the second word there, enforcement arm. So not only are they ready to investigate rules that they write, they think they'll have the power to enforce them. Now, how would they have the power to enforce them? Because what we've come to learn lately in college sports is no one can enforce any rule. Why? Boom, because they get sued as soon as they do. Well, part two of this is they hope through that settlement they gain limited congressional help in implementing it. So limited antitrust exemption, meaning they can make rules that limit and govern what you can and can't do with NIL, and there's not a lawyer waiting around every corner to drop a bomb on their head. No one really knows whether this is going to go through. No one really knows, nor does the guy talking in this microphone right now, nor does anyone else watching know for sure whether this is going to be approved. If it is, though, what kind of world are we looking at? And why should I care if I'm a fan? Well, I want you to listen to this language. This is from Ross Dellinger's report today. What would they police? Quote, multiple penalties are under discussion for teams found to be circumventing or exceeding the new cap or any other rule violation, i.e. tampering, including school fines, revenue share pool reductions, and coach and administrator suspensions. So what you are entering now, if this is approved, you're entering a new world. In fact, later this year, we're entering the revenue sharing world. We're entering the revenue sharing era. Okay, if you're an LSU fan, you're going to have something like $20 to $21 million that you're allowed to spend on your roster. I didn't say thousand. I said million. Players are about to make a lot of money. College football players are about to make a lot of money off this. College football players are huge winners in this, huge winners. And anyone who screams at you otherwise is probably screaming at you otherwise because although the college football players are going to win, maybe they miss out on something. So it's in their best interest to scream from the mountaintops that the system is broken. System's not broken when $20 million are being divided up amongst college football roster. Full stop. I continue. Athletes whose outside NIL deals are found not to be at fair market value will be ruled ineligible if they execute those deals. Now, this is hypothetical. This is in this new world. As part of the settlement terms, there would be a separate court-overseen arbitration system that serves as an appeals process for athletes who believe their NIL deals were unfairly struck down. Here's what that translates to. Right now, I can offer a kid $10 million if I want to, and I can just say it's NIL. Everyone knows it's pay for play, but there's really no policing it. The NCAA has said as much. We got to back away this whole Tennessee thing that just went down. We can't enforce our own rules. This is a world where there would be rules, and they would be enforceable, and you would have congressional help of sorts in actually adding teeth to your enforcement arm. So when we're talking about this, what we're really talking about is you got $20 million that you can divide up amongst your roster, and NIL's still okay, but it better be fair market value. Because if I catch you, Pate State, although we would never do such things, but if they catch me, Pate State, going and spending $20.5 million on my roster, which I'm allowed to do because of revenue sharing, but then I'm still kind of sucking. So I need a quarterback, or maybe I need a left tackle. So I go over here and I ask my booster to kick in $6 million to go buy Oregon's left tackle. Can't do that anymore. And I can't do it because that's not fair market value. That's just pay for play. And in this hypothetical world, there are teeth. There is an investigative body and an enforcement arm that can actually drop the hammer on you, not from the NCAA. It's very important to note. I've been alluding to this for a couple of years now. I have long thought, and we were just ahead of the curve of it a little bit, I have long thought that the enforcement ultimately to get this sport back on track was not going to come from Indianapolis. The days of the NCAA being able to effectively police the sport have come and gone. The days of the conferences policing themselves are probably here. They were always going to have to be the ones to do it, and I think they will be the ones to do it. Now, I like it. I probably love it, but at the very least, I like it. And I'll tell you why. I hope we get to this world where there is an environment, there's a climate. I hope we get to this world where there's a climate where college football can create rules, conferences can create rules, conferences can come down punitively on their member institutions that violate them, not with make-believe vacating of wins, which contrary to some accounts on the internet don't really mean anything. I'm talking about a crowbar to the shins of a program, limiting your cap for the next year, suspending coaches, making players ineligible. The third one I don't like so much because it's not the player's fault someone offered him the money. I've actually never been a big fan of that part of it. But here's why I love it. Players make a ton of money. Part one of why I love this is players make a ton. We're not talking about dividing $1 or $2 million. You're talking about dividing $20 to $21 million for South Carolina's roster or Michigan's roster. That's not from NIL. That is, in case you're late to the party, what that is these schools make so much money just because they're in the SEC or because they're in the Big Ten because of media rights, that there's this massive pool of money there, and the ruling, the agreed upon ruling is such that these schools are going to share some of that money with the players. So that's already going to happen. Those players are getting paid, man. They're getting paid really, really good money. A lot of these guys, including ones who don't go pro, will never make more money in their lives than they're about to make right now. So it's a good setup for them. They are incentivized to stick around. This is what I have my fingers crossed for. Like, one of the low-key most important aspects of this is whatever the revenue sharing system, whatever that model is, it really needs to incentivize roster synergy. And what I mean by that is I hope sophomores, juniors, and seniors who are on the same roster they were when they came out of high school are getting paid proportionately more than they were when they were freshmen. I hope that's a world. I know some athletic departments are planning on setting it up like that anyway because it's at their discretion. But, man, I hope for that. I think we'll get it. I think because of that, if that's the case, transfers don't disappear. In no world should a kid not be allowed to transfer. I think it greatly de-incentivizes the transferring from one roster to another, and I think, therefore, it greatly enhances and puts a premium on talent acquisition mechanisms again. Because right now, if you're being honest with yourself, if I'm being honest with myself, I don't pay attention to recruiting like I used to. Not because I don't think it matters. I think it matters a ton. But when I used to pay attention to recruiting, I'm paying attention to who Oklahoma's about to sign because I'm trying to imagine what Oklahoma's going to be in 3 years when this left tackle, left guard combo they just got out of high school are redshirt sophomores or juniors. That doesn't exist anymore. It's just not the way anyone thinks because in the back of your mind, you got a voice telling you chances are they're not even going to be there in 2 or 3 years. They'll either start immediately and, at that point, great, they're a star, or if they don't start immediately, some other school will come and pluck them and Oklahoma won't be able to pony up the money, and it's just ridiculous. It's not what college football is supposed to be. I want what's best for college football. That is, very selfishly, what I'm looking out for right now. And so I think if we get to that point, the premium returns to roster and talent acquisition. And that's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing that yesterday came and went and half of college football fans didn't even know it was signing day. And then you say, well, Josh, that's just because players sign early. Yeah, they felt the same way on the early signing day too, because no one really takes commitment seriously anymore. I don't say that like an old man yelling at clouds kind of deal. Like, I always thought commitment was the wrong word to use, period, when you describe what a player is doing when he signs his name to a college. But the concept of it doesn't mean anything to fans right now. That's not a good thing. It doesn't mean people turn your product off overnight, but it does mean in a strict plus-minus column situation, it is a minus for college football that people don't care about recruiting and take it as seriously as they used to. So I think that would return. I think pay for play is greatly reduced, and NIL, therefore, becomes what NIL really was, which is a few stars in this sport every year have a market value infinitely above and beyond what they're earning from their revenue share, and they ought to be good to test the market. In fact, any of them should be good to test the market. It's just that what you call NIL right now is a joke because NIL right now is just kind of a pay-for-play mechanism. And I would, of course, I know this because I've already engaged in it, I'd get a lot of pushback on that. I would get people who say things like, you're impeding the free market, Aren't you a capitalist? Of course I am. Aren't you a free market absolutist? Of course I am. What are we talking about? We're talking about college football. So the counter argument I've always made there is the same counter argument I've always made with nature preserves. I flat out think there should be carve-outs for college football. Point blank. Point blank. That's how I reason this in my mind. The same way I've always reasoned how zoos exist, how natural preserves exist. I mean, there's state parks in Nashville that have special federal carve-outs that allow them to exist as sort of little sanctuaries in the middle of a bigger city. Now, if that patch of land was governed and operated under the same laws and rules as the rest of the city, it would be flattened within a year, and condominiums would pop up there. But it can't. That can't happen, because what the city of Nashville and pretty much every other city in America has decided is, you know, we want progress economically, we want industrial progress, we want to grow, we want to do this and that. However, there are some things we want to hold on to. And therefore, we're going to treat this little patch of land special. I look at college football in the sporting world as sort of a little nature preserve. I just want special carve-outs for it. I do want exceptions to the rule because I think it serves the greater good of college football for them to exist. I think it serves the greater good of the athletes for it to exist, all of them for it to exist. And therefore, I think a very, very strong, robust college football product is to the greater good of society overall. I've always thought that. I'm not trying to preach a sermon to you. Society would survive without college football. However, selfishly, it's my favorite thing about society. So that's why I feel the way I do about it. And I would just humbly advise you, if you feel even remotely like that, you need to be following what Ross Dellinger's writing about over there. This is a really big deal. It's a really big deal.